Good evening. Welcome to Q&A. I'm Tony Jones, and answering your questions tonight, businesswoman, economist and commentator Judith Sloan. The Senate opposition leader, Wong. China-based restaurateur and philanthropist, Michelle Garnaut. Palmer United Party Senator-elect, Jacqui Lambie. And the Minister for Human Services, Marise Payne. Please welcome our panel. Thank you. And as usual, being simulcast on ABC News 24 and News Radio, and you can join the Twitter conversation or send us a question on Twitter by using the Quanda hashtag that just appeared on your screen. Well, our first question tonight comes from Rob Jones.
You're witnessing a generation of Australians facing a lifetime of property rental, low wage growth and widening wealth inequality. Given the proposed raising of the retirement age, does the panel think we are witnessing a return to an age of working until the day we die?
Marise Payne, we're going to have to work till we die eventually.
It sometimes seems like that in the Senate, but Senator Wong and I are kind of used to that. I think the question doesn't really address the challenge that the government is facing at the moment in terms of the state of the economy, and that is that we can't ignore the facts that sit there quite starkly in front of us. As the Secretary of the Treasury, Martin Parkinson, said, I think just last week, if we continue along the policy approach that has been taken over the last few years, then within 10 years, we'll find ourselves with a debt of $667 billion and 16 consecutive deficits. So what the Treasurer is saying quite clearly is that we actually have to stop that. We have to change the way that we're doing business, and it won't be a simple task, not by any means, and he doesn't shirk that, I don't think, nor does any member of the government.
Marise Payne, let's go to the other thing he said quite clearly, which is that his generation, Generation X, will have to work very likely until they're 70. So is that what we're going to see in the budget, a move to raise the retirement age to 70?
Well, obviously, I'm not in a position to discuss the details of the budget, and you would
but you can discuss what he's already said.
That, Tony. And I think the debate and the discussion is incredibly important. The other thing that I find extraordinarily frustrating about politics in Australia sometimes is our lack of a capacity to actually have the discussion and have the debate. And instead, we fly to the most extreme point at a million miles an hour and try and corner people and say, this is what you must do if you even think about trying to address the problem. I don't think that's very constructive, and I would like to think that the Treasurer...
But what about addressing the actual age that he was talking about, which is 70?
Well, I don't know what the details of the budget are, but there will come a point where we have to look at the number of pensioners we have. I think there are almost 2.3 million aged pensioners in Australia at the moment, 820,000 people or so on the disability support pension. That's 3 million Australians in that category now, and we're trying to look forward 10, 15, 20 years, and what the government is going to have to do and what the Treasurer is trying to do is seriously open up the discussion about that.
Okay, without actually mentioning the number 70.
Well, I've seen 70 written, I've seen 66 written, and as the former government did, they began this increased process themselves under the previous government.
I just want to hear from Jacqui Lambie on this, and I'll come to the rest of the panel in a moment. The questioner asks, are we eventually going to have to work until we die? What do you think?
Well, you know, I think I'm looking forward to retiring. That's the first thing. And I don't think... I've had enough already, look at that. And, you know, but I look at my father now that's 65, and I know he works for charity and he takes his pension payments, and that's great, but I don't particularly want to see my father working another 5 years, so I'm a lot more interested in what we're going to do about our youth in the country to find them jobs. And the next thing is jobs are far and in between now. So when, you know, is there going to be jobs for us? And I'm certainly not going to take jobs away from our youth in 20 or 30 years' time. I won't be a part of that.
All right, we're going to be coming to that question shortly. Let's go to Colin King for our next question. I'll bring in the rest of the panel. It's on the same subject. Okay. Go ahead, Colin.
Retired, and I'm 74 years of age and have had my own business. I commenced working at the age of 15. Opportunities for women to have rewarding careers have made working so much more interesting and enjoyable. I'm all for extending the working age, though not compulsory, and as they do in America, where women are working up to age 80. So why is it that the opposition are so opposed to longer working ages?
Penny Wong, that's for you.
Well, a couple of... I'll respond to both, if I may. First, Tony Abbott said before the election, when we, as the then government, said you are going to cut a whole range of benefits to Australians, he said no cuts to health, no cuts to education, no cuts or changes to the pension. And the fact that Marise even sits here and suggests, oh, like, I don't even know what numbers in the budget demonstrate that commitment was a false commitment. Well, you tell us now that that's not the case, Marise. The second point I make, a whole bundle of numbers were trotted out before. What we're seeing is a government that said one thing before the election, then they create a whole set of scary numbers by changing the assumptions, by doubling the deficit and increasing the deficits over the forward estimates by a whole range of mechanisms, in order to then say, hey, we now have to break all our promises. And that it is such an obvious ploy. You wonder that they actually would think that Australians would fall for it. If I can respond to the last question, I am absolutely for people working for as long as they wish to and having the opportunity to do that. And I think that the more we can do to try and change our work practices to enable that to happen, so people can choose to do that, that's great. But both in terms of the people I know personally, so anecdotally, but also if you look at the structure of the workforce, the fact is it's hard for many older people to get work as they would want to. And second, I think if you've done a hard manual labouring job for a lot of your life, it's unrealistic to think that it's going to be an easy thing for you to find a job when you're 68, 69 and 70. It's just unrealistic. And I want to ask this question: why, when a government wants to spend $5.5 billion a year on a paid parental leave for people who are very wealthy, paid parental leave scheme for people who are very wealthy, why would you target Australia's pensioners first? I mean, they're amongst the people who earn the least in Australia. We have one of the most tightly targeted pension systems in the world. Why would you start a discussion about entitlement by targeting Australia's pensioners?
Well, Penny Wong, it's the audience that gets to ask the question.
It
is a rhetorical question, but it may well come from the audience. So we'll go to Judith Sloan on the question that was asked, which is about the retirement age, effectively. And the question is about working possibly until you're 70. What are the economics of allowing people to keep retiring at the age of 65?
Well, I think this topic, it would be much more useful, Penny and Marise, actually to take it out of the short-term political gladiator fight, because it is actually a discussion about something that is a much more long-term issue. And Penny, your government seemed to have no trouble in lifting the retirement age
back into having a go at Labor
from 66 to 67. And as I remember, there was not a tremendous backlash against that. So I think the other point that people have to realise is that if we think about the entire working life, people actually don't enter certainly the full-time paid professional workforce until much later than used to be the case. So, people used to leave school at 15 or 16 and go into work, particularly men, of course, and then they would work up until the retirement age. We actually don't have a technical retirement age anymore. So if we kind of see in terms of total years in the workforce, it's actually not very much change.
We do have an age at which you can collect the pension. That's what's critically changing,
Yeah.
and because of the budget implications. Are you arguing that it's economically unfeasible to keep the pension age low?
Well, I think the thing is that a number of countries have done this, and I think this is quite a sensible idea. They've introduced a formula which basically pegs the age at which you become entitled to the age pension to what's changing in terms of life expectancy. So it kind of takes the politics out of it and it is more formulaic. Now, the truth of the matter is, Penny and Marise, for people who have hard working lives, and they're a decreasing proportion who are engaged in physical activity, they don't make 65. As a matter of fact. I mean, if you look at the figures, they do not make 65. So they probably won't make 70 either. So you're going to have special arrangements for them. But the fact of the matter is that for many, many people, and the majority of people are in the service sector, working to 70 is not only possible, but actually, as our questioner posed, it's a really useful thing to do. I mean, they got rid of the retirement age at the universities, and people keep going, and that's fine.
I'd like to hear from Michelle.
I would just
what
like
do they
to
do
say
in
yes.
China?
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm not here to speak on behalf of the Chinese government. That's something I've got to make clear completely. But what does happen in China is that actually the retirement age is 60, and for women, that's for men. For women, it's 55 if you're in the government, in civil government, and it's 50 if you're a worker for women. And actually, there's a lot of arguments going on in China right now about also increasing this age up a bit to maybe 62. So, and that seems to be a question that is being fought at the moment. And one of the interesting things about this is that there's an argument from women saying that women being forced to retire at 50, is pushing them out of the labour force early on. So they want to work earlier, but they want to work longer. But the poll right now is that 91% of people in China don't want any change made to the pension or retirement system.
So the Chinese tie it to life expectancy, and is life expectancy lower in China? I assume that
life
it is,
expectancy is a bit lower in China, but not as low as you maybe think. I think it's 74 for men and 78 for women or something like that. But of course, China's got a really big ageing population, and China is dealing not with, China's got enormous numbers of people to deal with and introducing a pension system, and they're actually improving and increasing their pension system. So I sort of think there's 23 million people in Australia. Is it really that difficult?
They do have $5 trillion in foreign reserves, and we have a deficit, so there is a bit of a difference. Yeah. Let me quickly go to another question. It's on a similar topic. It's from Stuart Thompson.
According to an article in the Sydney Morning Herald, there are currently 257,000 youth unemployed, which is double the national rate of 6%. How will Joe Hockey's proposal to increase the mandatory retirement age to 70% help this? Won't it just have the undesired effect of creating a larger demand for youth allowance and other benefits? And this will mean less jobs are freed up. What does the current government propose to ensure that I won't just become another unemployment statistic?
I'll go back to Jacqui Lambie on this, because you did start talking about this, and the youth unemployment problem in Tasmania is spectacular.
Oh, it's out of control. There's no doubt about that. We have 30% unemployment rate on the northwest coast. I don't know what the simple answer is. People have been throwing ideas at me for. I've been out there running for 2.5 years. So I don't have an office. I do it from my car and my boots on. That's how I do it. But if there was one thing that people have mentioned to me, and I'll say it straight down the line, it's opening up national service in our military again. You can put them in for 12 months. I'm not saying they sign on for war. But, in 6 weeks, we can have these guys with licences, with truck licences. We can have them with clerical experience, okay? And it's got to be better than being on the dole. But, to give these youth that sort of experience, I think that's a great opportunity. We've got the SES, they're down on numbers. We need volunteers out there, and we need to do more. And I think we need to do a little bit of tough love. And if you're not going to go out and volunteer yourself for charity services, or you're not going to go and volunteer yourself for SES, then you know what, it's time to cut your dole back.
Let me just ask you this quickly. Do you know if Clive Palmer and the other PUP senators are on board with the idea of national service?
I haven't spoken to the other senators about national service. All I'm doing is throwing the ideas out there, but it's better than sitting back here and not saying anything.
What do you think about the suggestion that actually, our questioner's got his hand. I'll come back to you. Well, in fact, I'll go straight to you. Go ahead.
I don't think that National Youth Service is the answer. I think there are already lots of youth doing great things out in the community, and I think we should just be encouraging more rather than forcing people to do military service.
I'm not forcing them. What I'm saying is you should stand for your country. We've got 50,000... What I'm saying is, mate, we've got 50,000 full-time service personnel just over... That's just on half the Melbourne cricket ground. And, you can sit there and have a bit of a laugh, but if war shows up on our shores, then we're in trouble. Let's face it.
Jacqui, the questioner asked earlier whether or not increasing the retirement age would actually take jobs away from younger people. More older people would stay in the workforce longer. That is at the heart of his question.
Well, that's going to depend on what party is in power over the next 20 or 30 years and whether or not they can produce jobs.
Judith Sloan, I'll come to Judith Sloan. I want to hear from an economist on this.
Sure. I don't think that's the right way of thinking about it. The idea that older people take jobs away from younger people, if you look at actually what older people and younger people do, you'll find that there's not much overlap. And indeed, there's an argument that they're complements. I think the thing is, what's happened with youth unemployment is that as the rate of overall unemployment has increased, so the rate of youth unemployment has increased more rapidly. And that's exactly what does tend to happen. We had very high rates of youth unemployment back in the 1990s, for example. We then had a very strong period of economic growth and strength in the labour market, and we saw the youth unemployment rate fall down. So it is just a reflection of that. So really the key is to get a strategy that has the labour market growing strongly and unemployment overall coming down, and then you will see some improvement in youth unemployment.
Okay, I'm just quickly going to go to this gentleman down the front here, had his hand up. I'll go to that and then we'll hear from our other panellists. Go ahead.
Yeah, Tony, I agree with Jacqui there with bringing in the service, but don't forget we've also got people who are not getting trained enough to get jobs, and we should be also looking at training as well, and that's a good way of the service by doing that training.
Penny Wong.
Well, I'm in part going to agree with Judith Sloan, which might be extraordinary, isn't it? I don't. We should write this down. But I don't. I think I don't see them as mutually exclusive. But what I think about youth unemployment is this. Young people are most vulnerable, I suppose, to the changes in the labour market, the fact that we've got an economy that is changing quite differently, quite a lot. So the sorts of jobs you will get, the sorts of jobs you might look at will be very, very different to the ones your parents and your grandparents looked at. And certainly the idea that past generations might have had, that you choose a career, you might even choose a particular firm to work with for long periods of time. You know, the workforce doesn't work like that, and the labour market doesn't work like that. So we need to do two things, I think. The first is recognise that some of the jobs for which we are training young people have not yet been invented, as it were, created. There are going to be a whole range of jobs we can only think about or envisage, and barely so. So we need to make sure we invest a lot in skills, and that those skills are flexible and transferable for a labour market that's going to look very different in 5, 10, 15 and 20 years now to what it looks like today.
I'm just going to quickly go to that lady with her hand up right there, and then I'll come to Marise Payne. Go ahead.
I've owned my own business before. I'm a bit of a self-starter. I'm currently on a single-parent pension, and I think some flexibility and the ability to be able to work with business. You know, businesses quite often need additional employees that perhaps they can't afford. An internship might work for them. Certainly in my circumstances where I'm limited with time, the ability to be able to grow my skills and keep abreast of everything and work with businesses, I would be happy to do so without any income and to do it off the back of my single parent pension. I think there are a lot of youth that would be interested in doing that, and certainly aged or that ageing population that want to stay in the workforce, then they too will work for little, no, perhaps for their benefit, if we could create some programs where that was allowed to happen.
Okay, let's go to Marise Payne on that and some of the other things we're talking about as well.
I think you make some very good points there, and I think a flexibility in the system would not be a bad thing. My role at the moment is to, I guess, make the payments right across the board of the social security system, including single parents and New Start and so on. And one thing which has been raised with me quite regularly just over the last 6 months is the need for a bit more flexibility in the way we approach people's individual circumstances. I may briefly agree with Penny, so we could be in awful danger of a unity ticket, but we do have a very targeted welfare system in this country. A very targeted system in this country, which is in our favour. It does a very good job. But the point that Judith makes about having to have a strong economy so that you have businesses in a position where they are creating jobs is the threshold point of the argument.
Marise Payne, how much flexibility could you put into the system? I mean, the problem now is if you earn a certain amount of money, you go off the pension.
I think that's a very interesting question, and it's part of what the McClure Review has been looking at in the past few months, which the Minister Kevin Andrews initiated. the sorts of questions which are asked of me are exactly the same sorts of things that you've mentioned. People who, for example, have a chronic condition are in receipt of the disability support pension, but because it's a chronic condition, it tends to wax and wane. So they find themselves really very engaged in the workforce, very, very keen, but then they'll fall into a period of illness again, and their earning is restricted because of the rules around the pension itself. So I'm probably horrifying tens of thousands of bureaucrats in Canberra somewhere. But I do think for the purposes of serving Australians properly and well, these are the sorts of things that we have to consider. So I really appreciate your input.
Thank you. You're watching Q&A. Our next question is a video. It comes from Dr. Eleanor Evans in Kingswood, South Australia.
My question is for Jacqui Lambie. As a senator, you now have an opportunity to ask questions and benefit from the expertise and experience of specialists in every field. If during this process of self-education you came to a new understanding on a subject, for example, the effects of carbon emissions on the survival prospects of your children and on your grandchildren, how would you incorporate this new knowledge into the kinds of decisions you will be asked to make? Thank you.
Jacqui Lambie.
Well, you know, I must say the whole carbon thing's not really one of my favourite subjects. I'll be honest, I've seen what it's done to the elderly age pensioners, and I've seen what it's done to the veterans, I've seen what it's done to the disability pensioners, and by them paying extra power, certainly not going to drop down our carbon, that's for sure.
If you were to speak to a group of scientists and they were to convince you that climate change is a problem and it's caused by global warming and that global warming's caused by emissions, would you think differently about it?
Well, of course I would, but right now I have half the scientists on this side and the other half on this side, so, you know, well, go figure.
That's not right. There's not half and half. That's not right. Absolutely not.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of propaganda about this, and I think it's got completely out of control, and we need to get it sorted, and we need to get it sorted as possible. But what I'm worried about are the effects that are coming out of industry if they're causing detrimental effects to our health. And what they're doing that, because that's actually putting a strain on our health budget. I'm a lot more concerned about that.
At a more general level, given that you're just about to join the Senate, and people are quite interested to know whether the Palmer United senators will all follow a line that Clive Palmer tells you to, or whether you'll all be independent in the way that you vote.
What happens is we all sit, well, we do what the rest of the parties do, and we all sit behind a door, and then we all decide from there what is the best course of action to take. And that's how we do it. And we listen to the experts, and we listen to the people on the ground, we listen to our electorates, and we listen to our states and territories. And that's what we're doing, and that's what we should be doing.
OK, let's go on and we'll hear next question. It's from Cara Egan.
On the day before the last federal election, Tony Abbott said, no cuts to education, no cuts to health, no changes to pension, no change to the GST, and no cuts to the ABC or SBS. Apparently, he didn't write these promises down. On the list of the untouchables, only the GST remains. Does Tony Abbott have such contempt for Australian voters that he believes they will forget that he is not a man of his word in 3 years' time?
Marise Payne.
Thank you very much, Cara. Thank you very much for your question. I think that it would be perhaps injudicious to take all of the pre-budget commentary as verbatim truth as it comes from the various aspects of the media, various commentators and experts, self-appointed and otherwise, around the community. We are a month out from the budget, and although Penny said I should be talking about what's in the budget, I would love to have seen a member of the previous government doing that a month out. Suspect it wouldn't have been the case.
But will the promise
but
be
we
kept?
have,
That's the
as
question.
I said, we have an
know.
extraordinarily difficult budgetary position to address. I'm not going to run away from that, and neither is any other member of the government or the ministry or the cabinet. It would be completely irresponsible for us to do so. And over the years that I have been watching governments form and budgets brought down, the governments that haven't been prepared to face up to the reality and have kept on spending and have kept on maintaining the same policy positions which get us into more and more trouble are the reason that we're in the problem we are now. And
So
I certainly
can I just
wouldn't
ask
want to
a
be
quick
part of a
question,
government that did that.
just related to what the questioner asked? Is the budget situation, in your opinion, so bad that promises need to be broken?
I'm not going to comment on those individual issues because, Tony, I don't have that detail. But I will say that from what I do understand, the budget position is very bad. Yes.
Penny Wong.
Well, I mean, the promise was made, and it's quite clear the promise isn't going to be kept. If it were the case, you can't imagine that a minister would be sent on a show like this and told, actually, we will keep our election promises, and you not say it, and you're not saying it, so clearly the promise will be broken. So why did he say it? I think it's pretty obvious.
Well, can I pose a possible question, and that is that Labor promised expenditure growth of 2%.
Sure. Which
I think the actual expenditure growth is 3.5%, and this seems to be the problem.
No, that's not
right. That's certainly what the Treasurer is claiming.
No, that's not right. Well, just hang on a sec. Let's get some facts on the table. It is true, in the 8-9 year, we did put a lot of stimulus into the economy. And I know others may not agree with it, but it's one of the reasons our economy kept growing and our unemployment rate was far lower than most other advanced economies. Now, people might want to argue counterfactual and say, oh, you shouldn't have spent so much money, you should have let the economy go into recession and so forth. That's not the judgment the Labor government made. If you look at 2009 onwards, we did keep to the 2% rule. And what this government is doing is fudging the figures in order to create big, scary numbers to do exactly what they're just doing now, which is justifying a promise that was made. A promise that was made in full knowledge of the budget situation, because one thing that Peter Costello did, which was very important, he introduced a charter of budget honesty, and he made sure that there is something called the pre-election economic and fiscal outlook. It's like a budget update that politicians have nothing to do with, that the Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Finance issue. And that showed there is no budget emergency. So now they're trying to create one in order to justify breaking these promises.
So, Tony, can I make one point?
Yes, you can. I don't want to hear from Judith.
In the last 6 months, since the Parliament resumed in October of last year, or September of last year, we have put forward, give or take, about $20 billion of savings initiatives to the Parliament, including some which were previously advanced by the previous government, and they've been knocked back.
Yeah, because you're not spending it on education.
That's completely unrealistic.
No, hang on. You can't say, like, we took savings to spend on education for the reasons the young man... No, look, that's an example. In order to make the investments that I referenced when I answered the question from the gentleman at the back, because we believe that it is important to put money into education. You want us to vote for savings, but you want to take the money away from education. You don't want to commit to the Gonski reforms, which you previously had a unity ticket on.
Oh, you know.
I mean, it's just...
Okay, let's hear from our other panellists. Michelle Garnaut, listening to this.
Michelle Garnaut's going home. All this vitriolic politics. Heavens above.
We'll talk about food.
No. I'm not talking about food. We don't need to talk about food.
I'd love to talk about food.
Okay, all right.
You know what? The unfortunate thing is, it doesn't matter whether you're Liberal or Labor. For years, you've lied. That's what you've done. That's what you've done. You've won your seat. You've lied.
It's nice to meet you
and that's
too,
how you win. I'm just being honest. Let's be honest.
Judith Sloan is an economist. Maybe she'll give us an
That's why there's
economist's
a new
take
party
on
coming,
these
because
figures.
we're sick of the lies. We've had enough, you know, and so have the majority of Australians. It's enough. Enough of the lies. Be honest. If you can't make your target, then tell Australians, but at least be honest. But don't come out like the parental leave and come out 3 or 4 weeks before an election and promise these ladies up here that make a mint that they're going to get more money from having babies, because that's absolute rubbish just to win seats. That's just being a flat-out liar. There's no way Tony Abbott's going to get that across the table.
All right, hang on. We actually have a question on that subject from Rodney Winterswick.
If the Palmer United Party plans to oppose the paid parental leave in its current format, what alternatives would your party consider to push through a paid parental leave, and do you consider that it should be backed by business or by the government?
Well, we believe it should be backed by both. And first off, we think maximum payment should be $50,000 over 12 months, or $25,000 over 6 months. We think that's a fair quota. What we want to do is, out of that, all that money that Tony Abbott would like to spend, is we'd like to look after our veterans. We'd like to look after our elderly pensioners, our disabled pensioners, because right now they're living below the poverty line. And that's not fair. That's un-Australian.
Does that mean, by the way, that given you will hold the balance of power, that you will attempt to stop the Abbott government's paid parental leave going through at its current rate?
Yeah, no, it won't be going through at its current rate, Tony, I can tell you that right now, and that's from all the senators.
Well, you might want to talk to Marise Payne about that because
I think
she's going to...
I think I just told you.
I think Jacqui just gave us...
Probably a few people in the Liberal Party breathe a sigh of relief, Jacqui.
I would imagine they will, actually. I'd have to agree with you there.
Marise Payne, will you be breathing a sigh of relief if this paid parental scheme, at its current rate of potentially paying $75,000 to women who earn $150,000 to have a baby, essentially. Will you breathe a sigh of relief if the Palmer United Party stops it, which it sounds like they will?
Well, we're committed to the scheme, Tony, and that's straight up exactly what the Prime Minister has said consistently since the day it was first discussed. But I think it might be an apposite moment to note, given the very sad passing of former Senator Brian Harradine today, the former father of the Senate, with whom I had an opportunity to work, and I think Penny did too, that the Senate's been a tough place for negotiations over a very long period of time, and a new Senate won't be any different.
So, well, you can obviously see that this, if the Palmer United Party is holding the balance of power, this is not going to get through. I mean, that's absolutely clear from what we're hearing tonight.
Yeah, we're going to use some common sense here, and, you know, we're going to share that money around a little bit where it should be needed, and that's to the disadvantage and those living on or below the poverty line, because that's the Australian thing to do.
We should all negotiate on Q&A, it's excellent.
You must have a female cabinet, that's what's wrong.
A female cabinet, yes, well, there's only one so far, but it sounds like this is what's going to happen, Marise Payne. Do you accept that you won't have any choice but to bargain down on the expectations?
Well, Tony, I'm not going to run with the hypotheticals into the future. We're currently still trying to negotiate the repeal of the carbon tax, the repeal of the mining tax. It'll come to 1 July, and we'll continue with those negotiations. We'll start this negotiation. It's a let's say a moving feast.
Judith Sloan, you've been listening to this, and I know that you oppose the paid parental leave scheme at that level anyway. Are you relieved to hear that the Palmer United Party will effectively stop it?
Well, I haven't been a fan of the paid parental leave scheme, although there are some anomalies. I mean, our public servants, of course, get paid very generously at the moment, but leave that issue aside. I think one of the really big problems is this, Marise, is that we are being asked to all make a sacrifice, to all chip in to deal with the budget problem. And emergency is a strong word, but even your government, Penny, thought that they had a budget problem and wanted to return to surplus but couldn't. So I think the thing is, I think people might even kind of sign on to that. But then juxtaposed against that is a $5.5 billion paid parental leave scheme, which looks extraordinarily generous. And so I think the message just becomes very confused. And I think politically the government would be much easier just dealing with the line that we've all got to make sacrifices, we've all got to chip in, and not just then accept. I mean, it's only about 150,000 women a year that will be preferenced by this arrangement, and I think a lot of people would find that will stick in their craw when they're being asked to make sacrifices.
Okay, let's move on. Our next question is another video. It's from Ted Chittum in Brisbane.
The Palmer United Party won public support by its announcement to block the Mining Tax Repeal Act until the government changed its plans to axe the education allowance to 1,240 veterans' orphaned children. Jacqui, will the Palmer United Party extend its willingness to support 29,000 totally and permanently incapacitated disability veterans to support their raise of their pension?
Jacqui Lambie.
Oh, look, because we have that balance of power, which is wonderful, I'll be honest, look, we promised Australians that we would get rid of that tax, and we don't have a problem with that, but I can tell you what, there's a lot of other things that the Liberal Party will want, and I'll be making sure, first and foremost, not just Tasmania, but our war veterans are very well looked after. And when it comes to the orphans of our war veterans that are out there, which comes up to about $260,000 a year, honestly, if I was to say With all due respect, PM, I'm not going to allow your mining tax to go through and you want to bring up a double dissolution over $260,000. You know, you've got to ask when it comes to orphans of these veterans, where is the PM's humanity? Where is it? These guys have served their country. They've died for their country. They have kids there. They need this money. We're only looking at $200 per child here a year extra. So I don't see what the issue is.
Well, here's one issue. That gentleman's asking, would you extend that to pensions for the disabled veterans, the permanently disabled veterans? Would you seek and use that power that you have to try and get an increase for their pensions?
Yeah, I've made that quite clear. I'll be seeking a lot more for our veterans because they have earned it. They've protected this country. And the reason that we have free speech and a democracy in this country is because of our veterans. And I think we owe them that.
Marise Payne, it sounds like you might have a few budget challenges coming along the track thanks to the new balance of
Well,
powers.
you know what? They're actually not budget challenges because there's something that should have been done many years ago, whether it be by Labor or Liberal, and it should have been done out of respect to those men and women.
Sure, but they still have to pay for it. So the question to Marise
Payne...
Yeah,
but you know what? They wouldn't have to pay as much as what they're going to pay had they have done the right thing in the first place. Now they're going to be penalised for that.
Is this another issue you might end up having to bargain on?
I think, Tony, it would be foolish to ignore the introduction of the legislation to change the indexation of the DFRDB, which went into the Parliament quite recently and was an election commitment of ours in 2010 and 2013, which we are carrying through with. And although I understand the emotiveness of talking about the children of veterans and also the orphans of veterans, I think it's really important to emphasise that the payment was a bonus payment from the Minerals Resource Rent Tax. The tax has not returned the money that it was supposed to, but it doesn't mean that the government is not continuing to provide the payments which those children already receive. Payments for education at infant and primary and tertiary level, payments for boost payments as well. The bonus, yes, I understand and acknowledge the level of concern about that, and I spend a lot of my time and have over many years working within and around the veteran community. I'm the daughter of a World War II veteran.
Sure, but evidently, once again, you're going to be forced into a position where you actually have to reconsider that decision.
Well, I think that it's hard to actually say that in black and white, because what Jacqui hasn't referred to tonight is the DFRDB changes which we introduced in
actually, I'm glad you brought that up because you did the 50,000, so I want to know when the Liberal Party is going to come up with the other 156,000 men and women out there that you owe that indexation to.
Well, I think you have to actually, Jacqui...
Because I'm not happy about you giving it to some and not giving it to the other.
OK, I think what we're getting a hint of here is what internal negotiations may look like inside.
And I'm not sure we can do them on Q&A.
We won't deal with them all on Q&A. You're watching Q&A. We'll go to a broader question. It's a video. It comes from Kathy Lamb in Adelaide.
Women appear to be missing on the recent trade mission with the PM. Can women be successful in a conservative environment? Or do they need to do as Michaela Cash recently suggested and accept that politics is a boys' game? Where does the fear of the word feminism stem from in conservative politics?
Sure, Garnaut, let's start with you.
Oh, gracious, thanks very much. Finally, I don't think actually the word feminism belongs in conservative or any other sort of politics. I think that actually feminism belongs on the agenda. As soon as there is a new word for feminism that delivers to women everything that feminism has brought to women, great, tell us about it. But in the meantime, I think that the feminist argument is completely not dead, you know. I mean, the people, it seems to me, I've been following this quite a bit, and actually I was shocked by a tiny little video at the end of Insiders yesterday of Tony Abbott and getting all the boys up for a photo in, I think, Japan or Korea, it looked like it was. I'm not sure exactly where it was. And lining them all up and Rob and get up here and everybody get up here and here we are, and it's like, well, where are the women? Oh, where are the women? Oh, where are the women? Oh, gee.
Yeah,
it was like a self-parody of the whole thing. It was just ridiculous. It was embarrassment, the whole thing. So actually, thank you for the question from the lady. But
so, well, I mean, you're obviously a Shanghai businesswoman, and also.
Well, I wasn't there. I was in Australia,
it's
so
true.
obviously. But hopefully, I wasn't the only woman there.
Were you invited to join Team Australia?
I certainly wasn't. Luckily for us, we have very fantastic diplomatic women. The ambassador was there, female woman Frances Adamson. Also the Consul General in Shanghai and the Deputy Consul are all women. But they seem to be the only women in all of the clips that I saw of anything. So I don't know where the women were either. I'd like to know where they are as well.
Penny Wong, I'll come to you because you've made a speech about feminism recently in response to what Michaela Cash said. So you can answer any part of that question you wish.
Well, full disclosure, I know Kate. I can't believe she actually got a video up. No, she probably won't believe it either. I only saw that footage that you referenced, Michelle, tonight because someone said, oh, this might come up. And I thought what was really interesting about it was that he invited men up by their name.
Yes.
So Sam, up you come, you know, David, up you come, etc. And I thought, well, how many women are there? I know Gail Kelly, so you have Westpac, and I think Jennifer Westacott from the Business Council. He didn't say where is Jennifer and where is Gail. So where are the ladies? I thought that was really interesting. Look, I gave the speech about feminism, and this sort of answers the question, I guess, because I thought it was. I was provoked to think about why it is I believe that name is important when Michaela said what she said. And that was quite useful, actually, because you sometimes have to go back and think through why do I have these views and sort of question them and to consider why. And I think in part it's what Michelle said, that I think our work is not yet done. Feminism's work is not yet done, and there's a whole range of statistics we could go through about women's disadvantage, which I think would demonstrate that. And the second point I wanted to make is that I have the opportunities I have, as do women across Australia, because in great part women fought for the right to vote, feminists fought for the right to vote, feminists fought for equal pay, feminists fought for childcare, feminists fought for education, feminists fought against domestic violence, etc., etc., etc. And I think using the term is an important way of saying I acknowledge how my opportunities have come from these women, these brave women doing these things, and I also express my views about my values going forward, and they are to continue to work to try and redress disadvantage.
Judith Sloan, do you identify as being a feminist, or are you post-feminist?
Well, I'm possibly more post-feminist than post-modernist. But look, can I just go back to the trade mission? I mean, the thing is that was a reflection of the fact that there are relatively few females who are chief executives of our large companies. And I mean...
Not everybody was chief executive on this thing. I've got people in the film business who were there, and they're not chief executives.
No, and what's wrong with, I mean, Senator Wong, I'll admit, pay credit where credit's due, you're switched on. Just because she belongs to the Labor Party, why weren't some other females? If he doesn't want to take his own, because he doesn't believe they're good enough, then put somebody else over there. Give us a shot.
Well,
you might have just paid for your ticket.
Well, hang on. I mean, I think it was actually...
They did pay for the tickets, actually. That's what I
It was evidence of the seriousness of the visits, actually, that they were able to attract such senior executives, to tell you the truth. So we shouldn't shy away from that issue. Look, I think feminism, when it's the issue of allowing free choice and equal opportunity for women, I'm absolutely signed up. And I'm signed up for my daughters. When it comes to feminism, where it's about hatred of men or blaming men for the problems, I'm not up for that.
But what's feminist to do with hating men? There's got nothing to do with hating men. It's about rights for women.
I'll just go to a young woman with a hand up in the front row. Go ahead. I'll come to Marise in a second. Come on.
I'd just like to propose a different word for feminism, and that is maybe a gender equalist, because the issue is about gender equality. It's something both men and women should get behind. We can't just do it alone as women. We need men to help us as well, and that's not an exclusionary term. And I think gender equality is the issue we should be talking about in the media.
Okay, Marise Payne, are you a gender... Are you a gender equalist? Are you a feminist? Do you care?
I'm a feminist, and I have lots of male friends who are very out and proud to call themselves feminists as well. I have to say, though, I remember I've been in politics for a very, very long time, and I remember early in my career where, take no prisoners, you think you can do anything, losing a battle pre-selection or a vote of some sort. And one of my friends, who's now married to one of my House of Representatives colleagues, sent me a quote from the extraordinary British writer Rebecca West, which says, I don't know what a feminist is, but I do know that when I express sentiments that differentiate me from a doormat, people call me a feminist. Now, I kept that on the wall in my office, and I worked for some interesting blokes in Australian politics for a long time. I kept that on the wall in my office. It was by fax. I appreciate you probably don't use a fax or an email sort of generation, but it was a fax on my wall for a very long time through all of my political career.
Can I just
and I
interrupt
hang
you?
on to that.
Can I just ask you where all those feminists were in Team Australia during that photo call?
Well, I think Judith makes a valid point. We have a complete imbalance in Australia in our corporate world at the very top, and it would be fatuous, in fact, to deny that. But yes, Scal Kelly, Catherine Livingstone, Katie Gallagher, the Chief Minister of the ACT, and so on, all there and doing a great job. I think it was an amazing accomplishment, that particular trip. But so we have a real imbalance, and if one thing I can do in my political career is make some difference to that in due course, then I would really love to be able to sign off on that.
I just want to hear from Jacqui Lambie on that. Are you a feminist? Do you consider yourself a feminist?
I am, but I also believe in equal rights. I simply say this. I did 10 years in the army, so I just say this to men. The men either get out of my way or just go through you. It's as simple as that. I'm going.
You're watching Q&A live across Australia, and a quick note on last week's Q&A in Shanghai. Viewers in Australia saw it live, of course, and last night viewers in China were able to watch the program on Shanghai Media Group's English language station, and the full program has been posted up on Youku, that's China's equivalent of YouTube. Our next question comes from Stuart Lung.
Thank you, Tony. Given Mr. Abbas's apparent successes in obtaining trade agreements with Korea and Japan, will these successes impact on Australia's ability to establish a free trade agreement with China?
Michelle Garnaut, let's start with you.
Yeah, there's a lot of, it's very interesting trying to find out what's going on with the free trade agreement. I looked some information up today, actually. There have been 19 discussions on the free trade agreement in the last, I think, 7 or 8 years. Penny, is that right? And it seems that the only thing that's come out of it right now is that Union Pay, which is a credit card system, is now available in Australia with National Bank and a payment system for Asian countries to use, and that's China, Japan, Korea, Singapore. It doesn't really just seem what else is going on. Nobody was really talking about it in China very much. And I called back to China because I haven't been there to try and find out a bit of information. No one really seems to be talking about it very much. Presumably it will come up with APEC. I thought that the really irritating comment in the whole Team Australia visit, and not to denigrate it, I think that they did a good job in Japan and Korea, but I thought the whole really negative thing was going in with we've got best friends there and playing this best friend game. It's sort of like, come on, grow up, you guys. Bestie friends. Really, what is this? I thought that was really stupid. And I think to sort of go in and try to, I'm best friends with them and I'm not going to talk to you, that just sort of seems stupid to me. And I think that probably peeved people, and the Chinese are not always really immediate in what they say. They're actually
Are you talking about
measured.
suggesting we're best friends with Japan? That would have.
Well, it wasn't suggested. It was very straightforward.
No, but it wasn't clear from what you were saying.
Oh, sorry. Yes, that's exactly what I was talking about. And then going to sort of Korea, which actually Korea and Japanese also have some problems with each other, and then going to China and partly, I think, yes, the free trade agreement was definitely not going to be on the agenda.
Let's go to Marise Payne on this. If you do manage to get 3 free trade agreements in the space of a year, that would be possibly the signal achievement of the government, wouldn't it?
It would be an extraordinary thing, but I do think that the week or 9 days of the mission to Japan and Korea and to China, I think it's actually a really important message in North Asia, which is to say we are committed to this engagement. Andrew Robb, I know, had been doing an extraordinary amount of preparatory work, so it's not like we just sort of turned up out of the clear blue sky and said, hi, here we are, what do you think? I think the work that was put into that and the achievements that were made over those days will stand us in extraordinary good stead as a government as we continue in the international arena. We know from the Korean agreement and from the work that was done in Japan that we have very solid foundations there. And I think we can use those foundations. I think there is a maturity to the discussion in 2014 that perhaps during the negotiations that literally go back to the days of the Howard government, those 20 conversations that you referred to, Michelle, go back to pre-2007. I think there is a maturity in the discussion, and I hope that we can capitalise on that.
We've got a question, another question on that subject from up the back, and it's from Melissa Spiteri. There we go.
It was not too long ago that the Conservative press and now Prime Minister Abbott in particular demonised the investment policy of allowing foreigners to buy up Australia. So, you know, Mr Abbott basically refused a bipartisan policy when in opposition. So now, is he going to be trying to get that bipartisan policy through? Does he expect a backlash from the Conservative media for doing so?
Let's start with Penny Wong on this.
I think the backlash is most likely to come from the National Party, and I think we've already seen some of it. I assume you're referencing the comments the Prime Minister's made on foreign investment, and particularly from Chinese state-owned enterprises and more generally. And I think we've already seen Barnaby Joyce make some comments. We've seen previously Senator Williams, known as Whacker Williams, who's a National Party senator from New South Wales, talking about China as not being our ally and being communist, and we shouldn't treat them like we treat the United States. So I think the problem for the government is they've got we're pro-investment except for those bits that the National Party don't like. And so they've got to try and have.
Well, except on this occasion, Penny Wong, they've actually lifted the restrictions on Chinese investment up to $1 billion before it has to go to the Foreign Investment Review Board. So if there is going to be an objection from the National Party, they left it a bit late.
No, because the National Party have carved out the bits they care about, which is agribusiness and agricultural land. So they've got a much lower threshold. So the Chinese have a different set of investment rules to the Americans under the US FTA because the National Party have demanded that this bit be carved out. And I think the big problem for Mr Abbott's going to be the National Party, just as it was on GrainCorp, and the fact that was, you know, Warren Truss went on national television and said, "Oh, we're not going to have it," and he was right.
We're running out of time, so I want to hear from Judith Sloan on this.
Well, I think there are a lot of issues getting mixed up here. First of all, they're not free trade agreements; they're preferential trade agreements, and that was the approach of the previous government too. And in fact, the previous government was just unable to finalise these agreements. These have been... I
suppose we're confused because that's what the Prime Minister calls them.
I know, but, you know, let's get real, they're not. But
I might point out that New Zealand has free trade agreements by 2016. No, actually, it has free trade agreements.
No, it's another preferential trade agreement.
No, they have no taxes, have no tariffs.
Well,
that's free trade agreement.
Okay, it's an issue about this. You know, agriculture is the really difficult thing to crack. And so these agreements, we haven't finalised anything in China, so it's too early to talk about what's going to happen there. But they are providing a limited degree of increased access to some of our farmers over a period of time, sometimes reducing the tariffs down. Now, it's easy, I think, to think that this is important. Actually, did you see Craig Emerson did a little Twitter saying well done to the Abbott government on this? Because agriculture is the really difficult thing to crack. So I think these are a good first start.
The question was about investment.
Well, I'm going to just, because we need to quickly whip around the panel. Jacqui, Lambie, more and easier access to China for investment in Australia.
Well, I don't see Eric Abetz coming out and bragging what it's going to do for Tasmania. So, you know, bring it on. I'm just not... I haven't had a chance to have a look at them. They're not easy to find, so it'll be very interesting.
Clive Palmer's had a bit of a look at it and says there should be much tighter restrictions on Chinese investors.
Yeah, well, if that's what Clive Palmer said, he's seen it before the rest of us has, so I'll take Clive's word for that. But when it comes to Tasmania, like I said, I don't see Abetz running around and saying this is you beaut for us, because I can tell you what, we're in an economic... downturn down there. We're in an economic state of emergency and we need some help.
And you need some investment.
And we need some investment, we need some jobs. You know, our health is in crisis.
Would you mind if the investment came from China? That's the key thing.
No, I don't mind where the investment's coming from, but we need investment down in Tasmania, and we need it yesterday.
Okay, we've got time for...
Clive Palmer's mining venture, of course, was totally dependent on Chinese investment.
I would like to just say one thing. No one's really bringing up the racism word in all of this. You know, that actually, it's like, where is this agenda coming from? You know, no one's talking about, what does it matter if it comes from a state-owned enterprise or a private proxy behind a state-owned enterprise? I mean, actually, state-owned enterprise, there's this complete assumption that they're all corrupt, and I think that's really unfair. So I would just like to put that on the table.
Good. We'll take that as a comment. We've got time for one last question. It comes from Linton Chambers.
This one is to the panel. Regarding Bob Carr's recent book, and the majority of the rhetoric around it, we all were waiting for this, right? Was focusing on some of his outlandish statements, and that's primarily been regarding his torso and his sort of giant ego and his sort of prima donna demands. Actually, the current foreign minister has labelled him an egotistical self-promoter. I'm just wondering, is this an example of taking self-parody literally and in turn discrediting not only a well-written book, but also an individual who has successfully navigated his tenure in the Foreign Ministry?
Let's start with Penny Wong. He was your colleague, after all, in Cabinet.
I thought we really got through the show.
Just about. Nearly there.
Well, I mean, Bob is always entertaining.
He was obviously entertaining in Cabinet. He's decided to tell the world what happened in Cabinet and on a number of important issues. Was it okay for him to break Cabinet confidentiality?
No, it's not. Of course. And you would know from having asked me questions previously, my view about not only Cabinet discussions, but private conversations should stay private.
So the reason he says he did it was because he believed the Melbourne Israeli lobby, as he called it, was having a very unhealthy influence over policy and over the Prime Minister and her office in particular. Did you see any evidence of that?
No. No, I don't agree with that analysis. But look, I haven't read the book and I don't think I'm going to be reading it, so I'll leave it to others.
Hasn't he had enough free press?
Have you had a look at the book?
Hasn't he had enough free press?
What? Well, he's actually coming on this show next week, so
well,
the answer
is... more free press.
The answer is probably no.
Yeah, no.
But let me tell you this, when you're talking about free press, it indicates that he might be about to earn some money out of this book. He's giving it all to charity. Judith Sloan.
Yes, it seemed to be a sort of new definition of Labor values when he compared flying business class as the equivalent of the transatlantic slave trade. But, I mean, I actually think, Penny, the thing that would worry me the most is that he was clearly very critical of a lot of decisions of the Labor government. Now, if he's a true Labor man, shut up, would be my feeling. I don't see how that really helps the Labor Party, and I'm not sure it really helps the integrity of government processes. So if a Conservative politician wrote this sort of tell-all epistle, diary, I think I'd be very critical of that too.
Well, we have seen Lazarus Rising.
Yeah, but there wasn't a violation of,
no, I'm really kidding.
In the entrails of cabinet processes.
It was a very different read indeed.
It was.
Jacqui Lambie.
Oh, look, I have a golden rule where, first off, I don't read has-been written books by politicians. That's the first thing. Second point is I have no interest in knowing what Bob Carr's had for breakfast. And thirdly, if he's been on an exercise regime, he probably needs to go to the army for some training because he certainly hasn't come out looking like Rambo.
What did you make of the whole first class, business class thing? Because he was described in the tabloids as first class tosser for complaining that business class wasn't as good as first class on aeroplanes.
Look, Tony, with all due respect, I wouldn't bother wasting my time reading the book. I mean, we've got, I've got enough troubles going on in Tasmania and what's going on with our veterans, so I'm certainly not going to waste time on Bob Carr.
Plus, you've got a leader who flies around in a private aeroplane.
Oh, that's right, I've got Clive. He's more than entertaining enough, so... and I get that for free. I don't have to pay for that.
Marise Payne.
You might need to declare it, though.
At least I'll be honest about it.
I think she just did. I
never ever wanted to have to think about Bob Carr's torso, so thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And I have to say, I think it's probably one of the more timely retirements in politics.
Are you keeping a diary, by the way?
That'd be telling, Tony.
Oh, we'll have to wait. That is all we have time for tonight. Please thank our panel, Judith Sloan, Penny Wong, Michelle Garnaut and Jacqui Lambie, and Marise Payne. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next Monday we'll be joined by the man who describes himself as bizarre and extraordinary, the former Foreign Minister, Bob Carr. The former State Liberal leader, Kerry Chikarovsky. Social analyst and author Eva Cox. The editor of Britain's Spiked Online, Brendan O'Neill. And violin virtuoso, Nigel Kennedy, who'll also play for us. So until next week's Q&A, good night.